but deliver us from evil. In the name of the Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So today we're going to talk about the heart and what the importance of realizing that our motivations comes from there, namely where our desires of, right? Ultimately, good and evil come from the heart. That's where the root of all our choices is the the free will that's in there, not from external things, not from like our emotions or passions or ideas. Obviously, those can influence us, but it comes from the heart. Jesus says when he's talking about the Pharisees were focused on what you can eat, clean and unclean, and he said it's from the heart that evil comes, not from what you eat, right? But what it comes from the heart. So evil comes from the heart, and so also obviously we want to transform our hearts to be like Christ, so that goodness comes from the heart. Now, what happens is that oftentimes we have an assumption that there's something else that is the problem. Namely, not our heart's fine, something else the problem. Some of the basic things are, it starts out really superficially, namely like everybody else is the problem. If you people would just learn how to set up everything exactly the way I want to, then Father Goyette would be happy all the time. That's the problem with the world, right? Somebody else is the problem. And eventually you realize that nobody else is going to change. So, for a lot of alcoholics, that's kind of the foundational idea, namely, everybody else is causing my problems. Nobody else is changing or doing anything about it. So I'm just going to go drink and ignore it and put it all behind me. So there's that. So first it's like everybody else, they should change. But then as you start to battle and you realize you get a little better, then you start to think, well, it's the things in my, the emotions, my feelings, if I can control my thoughts, just control my thoughts, like try real hard not to think about it. If I training, when we're young, we like to train. Who did that, right? Anybody do any training when they're young? Like, I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going to get up every day. I'm going to run. Who ran? Who got up every day? Nobody? No, not you. You got to practice singing every day? Yeah, there we go. So in other words, like we can just, and so when we're beginning out, you think like holiness is a routine. You pray more, right? You sin less, and then you do difficult things, and then eventually figure it out. Just a little bit of training, I just one rosary. Now I can take 2 rosaries. Then it's like, oh, I heard Saint so-and-so said we had 3 rosaries. And then, I'm going to do 4. That'll cover it. Right. And then we're going to fast. And then we're going to fast 1 day a week and then 2 days a week. And then, so in other words, these things out there, right? In other words, the problem is training myself. In other words, my desires, my passions. That's why we think the Blessed Mother had it easy, right? Because the Blessed Mother, conceived without original sin, so she didn't have any, unruly desires. She never had the desire to eat 12 donuts, right? That was my problem. If only I didn't want to eat 12 donuts, then I wouldn't have a problem, right? My life would be, so much better. She never wanted to overeat. She never wanted to, it's just, in other words, she's just peaceful and calm, and therefore it's easy to follow God because the external things are in line, ignoring the main fact that Adam and Eve sinned when their passions on the outside were perfectly normal, not normal, aligned. Everything was right. They chose the sin in their heart. So also we choose the sin in our heart too. So take an example of the food, right? If only I didn't want to eat so much, then it'd be easy to be good, right? But then you figure out certain, I had a long battle with sugar, sometimes still going on. First I thought, all right, let me eat things that are less bad for me, like Jell-O. Like you can eat a whole bowl of Jell-O, right? If you eat a whole box of candy bars, you'd be really sick. They eat a bowl of Jell-O, and then it was just and then I had these crazy diets in the when was this? The 90s. It was so bad, my parents wrote me a letter saying, you have to stop the crazy diet. I was at college, and you have to, I was eating only vegetables. But then I gained like 15 pounds, like 2 weeks. Because I went from the crazy diet to just eat whatever I wanted, right? So obviously the root of the problem wasn't being addressed by this strict diet. And then, like different ways of cutting back and then going through the various ways of addiction. But I eventually gave up sugar, at least for 2 years. And I kind of gave up my desire for sugar. In my heart, God came in. Now, this is what I think God was doing. He's given me a special grace to realize the dynamic, right? So I gave up the desire. I rooted the desire for sugar out of my heart. In other words, I went down deeper and I said, I don't want sugar. Right? No more sugar ever. And then it was relatively easy because the desire in the heart was gone. It was special grace from God. And it wasn't a struggle anymore. Why wasn't it a struggle? Because my heart no longer wanted it, not because my taste buds no longer want it. Now, before you think Father Goya had achieved holiness, a high level of sanctity, right? Potato chips, white bread, rolls, they're still I have just as much problem with them. It's just the sugar I got, like conquered that one. But so in my heart though, but even deeper down there, the question was, why did I want the sugar? Right? I wanted the sugar, I think, I haven't quite figured this one out. I wanted the sugar because the sugar made me feel good. When I felt good, then that was a bliss. That was like a happiness. It was an artificial happiness I was looking for. Instead of trusting in the happiness that comes from God, I was seeking an artificial happiness. Like I just felt better all of a sudden. Who's with me in this one? Eat a donut, and then, poof, life is wonderful. Anybody relate? Yeah? No? All right. Oh yeah, it doesn't nearly. Then you got to eat another one, and another one, and another one, and eventually you sit there going, "Oh, I can't eat anymore. Now what do I do?" But it's like heaven for me. I was like, "This is the closest thing to heaven," but it's all fake. It's all not real. It's not the. So in other words, it's a pursuit after the heart was seeking happiness, but in the wrong place. Right. So that's what evil is. Evil is seeking God, not seeking God, but seeking good in the wrong place. You take God, you put him out of the place, you seek something else. But anyway, the point is, back to the point, which is our heart. We got to know our hearts. And our heart is the root of evil, as Jesus says. We have to ask now, just like with Jesus, with the hardness of the heart with the Pharisees, you have to ask for the grace to become aware of your heart. You have to ask for the grace to realize where the root of your problems lie. Because we tend to go superficial. Whether, like, for example, addiction, one approach is that, well, if I just get rid of everything, right? Never buy sugar, hide all the sugar, hide it all. In other words, if I remove it, then it'll be fine. But I still want sugar. Question is, why do I want the sugar? Because I'm running away from God. So same thing with other passions, like unforgiveness, right? What does Jesus say you have to do for forgiveness? Unless you forgive from the heart, right? Same thing will happen to you. The place. So we have to forgive other people from the heart. But what does that mean? Because most of us, right, we don't even know what's going on in our hearts. So it's like a battle. It's like a struggle, right? And that's why a lot of times with forgiveness, our brains literally think like, it'd be easy to be a Christian if this little person over here didn't do that to me. It wasn't, you got an easy job being a Christian because no one really ever hurt you much, but I got really hurt. This person really did that. And so now I have to forgive, and it's unfair. Why do I have to forgive this person? These people don't have to. But anyway, from the heart, you have to forgive from the heart. And ultimately, though, it's because we don't, and for some of us, though, it's literally we don't want to open our hearts to Christ. We don't want to open our hearts. We don't allow God in there. Right? So if we have, in order to discover our hearts, we want to discover, what's going on there. Then obviously realize if there's sinful tendencies in there, ask God to cleanse that, and also realize what we're truly desire, what we're looking for. Sometimes instead of like some people, they settle, right? They really want something, but they just shut it down. They want to follow Christ, but they're afraid, etc. So if you want to know what's in your heart, obviously you have to ask for revelation from God. But it's not just, well, that's good. Number one, ask God to reveal your heart to you. Another good prayer is create a clean heart in me, O Lord. Renew in me a steadfast spirit. That's from, I don't know where that's from one of the Psalms. Who's good at Psalms? Psalm 50, okay. So create a clean heart in me. In other words, admit that your heart needs to be cleaned. So pray for that grace, right? And then the second thing, you have to do something about it too. You just can't pray, right? Just like the sugar. Can't just say, Lord, help me give up, give up sugar. Can I have another donut? Well, God, I'm waiting, God. You have to do, not that you can do something to figure out your heart, but you have to try. You have to put an effort in it, and then God will reveal it to you. So you have to share your heart with God, the part you're able to. In other words, you got to be honest with God about what you're aware of, right? It's kind of like, the shrink, right? Anybody, psychologist, use a positive term there. When you go to the psychologist or counselor, right? I've done 15 years worth, so not knocking it. It has worked. But when you're there, they're asking all these questions. You don't have to raise your hand for this one. Who's been on the But I've done 15 years worth. They actually went away 7 months full time. We call it in the profession getting their brain fluffed. But they ask you these questions, and you're like, "What are you talking about?" I have no idea. How does that relate to your? And I have no idea. And so you're talking, but the thing is, if when you're talking, you're holding back, you're not going to make much progress. But if you're being honest when you're talking, even though you don't know what they're talking about and doesn't seem to relate and the goal is to get down here, right? But when you're talking to the counselor, if you hold back, then you don't get anywhere. So when you're talking to God, you got to not hold back when we're talking about what's in our heart. And then eventually, and through that process, right, then against God will reveal it to us. So 2 things: pray, ask God to show you your heart. 2, share what's in your heart, right? And number 3, be open to the fact that there's things in your heart that you're not aware of. Not because, they're in your heart, but you're not aware of it, because sometimes literally we just block it out, right? There's motives and things we don't want to deal with. We just kind of shut it all down, and it's like a slow process. But ask for God's grace and admit there's things that are going on that you don't realize, and then share your heart with Him. And then, right, then slowly he'll do that. He'll reveal yourself to you, reveal your heart to you. And the most important thing, well, not a most important thing, but another important thing is don't give up, right? It's a long journey. Yeah, I had 15 years of counseling. It took me a while. But don't give up, right? In other words, keep going at it, keep praying, keep talking to God, keep asking for His help, right? It's when you quit. Quitting is where the failure comes. Giving up is where the failure comes. But if you always trust that God knows what He's doing in leading you this journey, even if it seems like you're going in circles, have faith